And welcome back, everybody, to today's episode of the Eyes Open Podcast interviews. And we are very happy to have back on the show Kevin Annett. Now, for the people who don't know who Kevin Annett is, I'm going to let him give you guys a quick rundown of who he is for people that are new to the show. So, Kevin, go right ahead.
Well, I've been a long-time social activist, most of my life really, but for the last 30 years, I've been leading a whole campaign about initially genocide in Canada against Indigenous children, but that's spread all over the world now. We campaigned to set up the first common law court that put Pope Benedict on trial, forced him out of office. We've really launched the whole common law sovereignty movement, including the setting up of sovereign republics. There's a recent initiative in America where people have declared independence from the whole kind of rule by decree regime going on now. And we're working on the ground all the time to help people really reclaim their lives and, reestablish self-governance. And that's, one of the main things. One of my I've written 29 books. You can see them all online at Amazon and murderbydecree.com. But this one is really important because it's talking about how people can do that on the ground. And so I think a lot of people realize now it's kind of a make or break time. And, so we're putting that into effect really all over the world. We're part of an international movement now.
Awesome, great. So today's discussion is going to be about I hate that we didn't get a chance to go into it last time, but today's discussion is going to be centered around a lot around what we see happening with this transhumanism, in a sense, through the Neuralink that they're trying to push on people. And it was actually fascinating because I seen a video recently. It was with the influencer. I'm sure if you guys have seen this video, the biggest YouTuber out there named Mr. Beast, not surprising, was doing an interview with the guy who has a Neuralink installed, who's a paraplegic. And he was playing video games and moving mouses and doing all types of stuff on computers with his brain. So they're really trying to push this type of thing into humanity. So where do you see this as? We'll just start off there. So how do you see this? I want to hear your input on this.
Well, this is just the next stage in genocide. And at a very practical level for many years, I've been working with the survivors of a lot of the medical experiments that led to this. For example, one example is the massive use of children, especially Indigenous children, immigrant children, and others who were really vulnerable. Going back into the 1950s and 60s, interviewed hundreds of people who were part of these prototypes that were being inserted in them. Basically, the whole agenda of the MKUltra research and all of this since the 1950s has been creating a military application for how you control the human brain, but not only individual human brains, but the consciousness of whole populations. And, you're seeing that now. The technology is rolled out in a big way. The whole Neuralink thing is, when you look at its recent evolution, and I know this having worked with neuroscientists and that who have this knowledge. I was just talking this week to a group of biolab employees who have documented kind of from the inside what's going on. The area of the brain that's being targeted is called the hippocampus. If you look at a cross section of the brain, it's the midbrain area. It's kind of a little lobe that hangs down, and it's responsible for things like memory, converting short-term to long-term memory, your sense of spatial dimensions. So the fact, it gives you a sense of where you are in the reality you're in. It also controls learning. And it's part of the limbic system, which is the thing that makes human beings unique. One of them is the limbic system gives us emotions. The ability to have empathy, love, support each other, all of those things. All of that's in the same area, and it's the area being targeted. I remember years ago, I worked with a Native woman who had been a nurse in a thing called the Nanaimo Indian Hospital, just kind of down the road from where I am right now, run by the military and the churches. They bring in Native kids, and she drew a diagram, and there was a long probe being inserted up the nostril of these kids. And you remember from the COVID times, they were often doing this to people, inserting things. It goes right into the midbrain area here. It's the area that lobotomize. They used to kind of go in above the eye and cut nerves and everything to lobotomize people. That's the area, being being experimented on and targeted. And the net effect of that is that people don't have their own memory. These are inserted memories. The ability to learn is completely stultified, and they don't have a sense of where they are anymore. And when you look at kids on iPads, and they'll be on it for a while, and then they go off it. They can't look you in the eye. It's like they don't even know where they are. They're in this substitute reality, this false cyber reality. So it's really kind of it isn't just genocide. It's the extermination of the human race under the guise of, well, there's this new technology that's going to help paraplegics and things like that. That's how it's always sold. That's always the hook that gets people in. But this is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. The three main centers of these labs where they happen, the big one is the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, which has 6 ICE facilities nearby, all in Arizona. And we know, having interviewed, again, people on the ground, that the ICE detainees are being brought in as guinea pigs for these experiments.
Wow.
We documented that actually an ICE worker and somebody who works in Barrow Institute described that happening. So don't forget.
Because who's going to advocate for them when you think about it?
Exactly. People disappear. And here's an interesting fact. This last year, when Elon Musk announced that they were going to roll out the neurochips, they're going to start mass producing them this year in the mid-years. The very month, actually, it was within a week of him announcing that, ICE announced that they were going to extend the period in which they could hold somebody from 7 days to 28 days, quadruple the length of time. And they were going to, this was all over the press, they were going to abolish all documentation, which means there's no record of the people they pick up. They can pick up anyone, and we're not just talking immigrants. They do this to a lot of citizens. They just pick them up, and with the private prison industry, it's a huge cash cow. You know, arresting people, lowering, or rather extending mandatory sentencing.
And I've been hearing about homeless people have been vanishing as well. There was a reports I've been seeing about that. The homeless populations have been kind of, right, dwindling.
So they bring them into these institutes. They're using them as guinea pigs. You have no record of what's happened. So your fellow citizens are disappearing into the night, like under Hitler, just vanished. There's no record of where they are. And not only the Barrow Institute in Phoenix, but in Fremont, California, and Austin, Texas, they have these big Neuralink facilities. And they're going to roll it out like they did with COVID. What was targeted against one group as the guinea pigs will now be extended to the whole population. And it's a program, of course, not just in America. It's all over the world this is happening. So we've got to look at kind of what's going on in the world in this bigger context of this assault on really an attempt to exterminate who we are as men and women, right?
Yeah, and see what you said, it kind of answers some questions I had, because I did a reel the other day about how these ICE detention centers, they're calling them, have been popping up everywhere, like in every state, all over the place. And now even people that aren't skeptic, conspiracy theorists, even they're starting to question, well, if you're shipping them out, why are you making these centers all over the place in such vast numbers? And it's starting to make even, people that aren't into this type of stuff start questioning, this is seeming a little off.
Well, the budget for ICE was boosted again, I think, by over $250 million. I mean, it's the biggest funded, quote, law enforcement agency now in America. It's really the private army of this new kind of corporate tyranny that's
the New World Order troops.
The New World Order, absolutely. Musk is kind of like the Joseph Mengele of America. And, it's pointless talking about party differences anymore. I say to people now, Americans got to unite around the defense of their lives and their liberties in their own minds, right?
Yep. And see, I'm noticing like the exodus from even Trump now. I've seen some diehard Trump people that within even the last week are posting on Facebook, okay, I admit it, I was duped. Because I think the Epstein files are starting to show that now. The fact Trump ain't doing anything about that, and he keeps trying to push it to the side, it's really waking people up that, wait a second here, there is no two parties. We're starting to see that really there's just one big power structure that's running all of it.
Yeah, and there's a brilliant picture about that. It's a picture of Hillary Clinton and Trump sitting with this Catholic Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who Trump wanted to put in as Pope. and they're all sitting at a banquet laughing together, like a few months ago, right? It's like they're all the way laughing to them at all of us for being duped, that into their nonsense. And the thing about Dolan, this Catholic cardinal, is he has been one of the things we found out working with people in Buffalo, New York. There was a priest there who tried to bring out the truth of child trafficking, and got 2 bullets in the back of the head.
Wow.
Just with his family. Joe Moreno, his name was. We found out in the course of doing that Dolan has been siphoning Catholic Church money, the Catholic Relief Agency, it's called, several $100 million right into Neuralink. It's kind of a backdoor funding going on, with Vatican money, like just the same way the Vatican Bank has signed a deal to underwrite the Chinese takeover of the North American economy. They did that 3 years ago in Canada. And, so it's Vatican money, and of course they want that agenda. Every pope always talks about the one world religion that they're going to run. It's part of this whole corporatist agenda, right? And we because like you say, the Epstein stuff, we know what the enemy is now. We know it isn't just about one guy; it's this whole cabal that don't hesitate to do these crimes, right?
Yeah, and see, I was talking about yesterday. I said, really, people need to start figuring because if everybody's just going to talk about it and there's no action going to be taken, what's the point of sitting around talking about it? It's almost like they're doing it on purpose to let you know nobody's going to do nothing about it, because we can show you we're all doing it and people are still going to do nothing about it. And what I explained to people is, I said, they're like, well, why don't we go after these people, stuff like that. I said, well, no, it's not that simple. People have tried that in the past and we've seen what ends they've met with. I said, essentially, in my opinion, it comes with confronting the machine. If you stop feeding the machine, if you stop buying their goods, if you stop feeding into their machine, that's essentially, I think, the biggest take back the Americans and the world populace can do in general, is to stop consuming so much.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And in fact, on January 20th, which was the first anniversary of the inauguration, Trump's inauguration, there was a thing called Free America, and it was all over the states, and kind of a grassroots movement. They all stayed home from work. They didn't buy anything. They went on strike for a day, right? And out of that, on the same day, was this new Declaration of Independence issued. And you can see it on murderbydecree.com under ITCCS updates. That's our latest posting about this group. They're called the Constitutional Assemblies of America. And they're people in 22 states, Republican and Democrat, crosses party lines, right? And non-party people, right? Just Americans. And they say, we're not going along with this regime anymore. We're not going to obey, these directives. They call them orders in council in Canada, but executive orders in America. One guy writes a law and everybody goes along with it. That's monarchy, that's not America. And so we say, we're not going to obey executive orders. We're not going to pay federal taxes. We're going to form assemblies and start passing laws in our community, get the local county sheriffs on board, form our own militias to protect ourselves. It's time now. It's another 1776. It's time. The British ships are in New York Harbor waiting to bombard us. It's exactly that situation. So that's some of the things we're doing on the ground. It's one of the reasons I'm coming to the States this coming month and working with people all over to help set this resistance network up.
And see, that's why they're forming all these type of, I believe, these type of weapons that can, like what happened when they went into Venezuela, those type of like energy directed weapons. I believe that's why, because people don't realize they're scared of the elite. The elite are terrified of the people, because the people in mass numbers, they're terrified of, because they know if there's a mass awakening and, like you said, people start getting organized, it's over with.
Yeah, it'll be a long fight. It's good to read Thomas Paine from the American Revolution, and like when he wrote Common Sense, it's amazing. The revolution was at a low point. It was the time of Valley Forge. The Continental Army had fallen apart. The British controlled all the cities. And Tom Paine wrote this incredible book, and it gave Americans the idea of what they had to do next. It was kind of a real shot in the arm, and something like 1 in every 2 Americans read or heard this, excerpts from this Common Sense, and it rallied. And we need the equivalent now. We need people with vision to start uniting with others and saying, we got to make America again, and there's no way in the present system you can reform it. This is way, way too far down the road for any sense of, okay, we're going to have in the next election, both parties serve this system. So who are you going to elect, right?
Yep. Now, in a spiritual sense, what do you see with this Neuralink and everything going along with this beast system that's coming to ever? Because a lot of people, a lot of my listeners are very interested, and we see the correlation and matchup with scripture and prophecy. So, what do you see along those lines as how this kind of fits in with that?
Well, that Declaration of Independence I described that came out on January 20th from patriots all over the country. It's interesting. It began with what they call a new covenant. And they went back to the very origin of America. And they said, how did the idea of self-governance came about? It's because when these Puritan pilgrims went, they were coming as a spiritual community to America. They said, they firmly believed, as do I, that America was divinely ordained. God said, you have a responsibility now to covenant together, to have a society where you, as they put it, create the kingdom of Christ on earth. You're not to have rulers over you. You're not to have kings and popes. You're to govern yourselves. That's what I want. And I found it really interesting that at the time of the American Revolution, there were about 600,000 slaves in America, right? And of course, that idea isn't you're not to have one person over another. You're not to have a system of slavery. It went against the whole idea of the American covenant. And guess how many people died in the American Civil War? Same number, 600,000. And Lincoln referred to that in his second inaugural address. He said, everyone who dies from the lash of a whip, another must die by the act of the sword. So it's kind of like God doesn't have our moral system. It's like some people describe the law of balance, the law of nature. You do something in one way, and there's going to be a consequence in the other, right? And it's all America had to go through that. Both sides suffered because of the sin of slavery, the evil of slavery that went against the American covenant of equality and liberty for all, right?
Mm.
Same thing now, it's a time of blowback and payback, but that's part of the divine wind, if you like, that kind of sweeps all the corruption away so we can begin again. And I think this is very much a divine act, what's going on now. It's God's will that we reestablish a true covenant again, where we're equal and we have the American vision. And so, no, I think this is a spiritual battle in a huge way, and it's a repetition of what we've been through before as Americans, right?
And I believe it was Thomas Jefferson that said the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. So I think we might be coming upon those times nowadays with everything that's going on.
It's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, it's not happening to us, so we don't see it, right? But it's happening to a lot of our fellow citizens. And, this hype about immigrants, if it wasn't for immigrants, there wouldn't be an America.
Oh, yeah.
And my ancestors, yours, and also, in the Bible it says, remember the immigrant and the stranger, for you were once as they.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You remember the one in bondage as you are too in bondage, right? And it's like, it's a very biblical message. And that's why, in a lot of the meetings we hold, we always start with prayer. We always ask people to, and, when that Declaration of Independence released, the first thing they said is, we're going to declare a week of fasting and prayer so we can cleanse ourselves inwardly and separate. You can't have political independence unless you have spiritual independence first.
And see, I've had a unique perspective because my family came over here on one side, because I'm Italian and Cherokee, on one side in 1903 as Italian immigrants, and then on the other side it was Cherokee. Right. So I have a unique kind of perspective that one side of my family's been here forever, and then the other side came over on boats in 1903. So it's
that's sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. That's just what I was saying. It's kind of a unique perspective.
It is, yeah. I'm in the same situation. Like, my ancestors were English and Scots-Irish, but on my mom's side, when they came to central Canada in the 1800s from the Scottish Highlands, they began intermarrying with the Cree and the Ojibwe. So I have relatives, and I'm Métis blood, or mixed blood, as they say. And the cool thing about working with Native people over the years is that you learn from that kind of remnant of the elders with the long traditions is they prophesied all this. They knew. They said there was going to be a, excuse me, there was he was a Seneca, a prophet, Daganoweda, and he lived about 100 years before Columbus, and he predicted, he said, a pale two-headed serpent is going to come from the east. And it's interesting because the word Vatican means serpent.
Yep.
Divine serpent. Okay. And he said, this serpent is crazy because it has two heads. One head is loving and rational and kind. The other is fierce and trying to destroy everything. And they don't even know they have two sides. And that's a description of our culture in many ways, right?
Absolutely.
And it's going to destroy itself. And said the people, equality, indigenous people here on this continent, have to hold themselves apart because the crazy ones are going to come to you for help. And it's interesting because when they wrote the Federalist Papers in America, they didn't base it on European. There was no model in Europe for consensual democracy, right? It was all elites. It was all the best you could do is elect your ruler every 5 or 6 years, right? But Tom Paine said, democracy isn't about choosing your master, but having none.
Yep.
And that's what the Six Nations believed. They said they were all equal in the Longhouse. And they used that model. Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and Madison, they used the Six Nations model of direct democracy and equality as the model for the U.S. Constitution. So the indigenous spirit is part of America. It's what formed the American Republic. And that's why, this genocide that happened, it was really against all of us because it was striking right at the heart of who we are as a people under God and with one another.
And I mean, we went to war over what, a 2% tax. Now we got a lot of Americans being taxed up to 40 something percent. Like, I mean, our forefathers would be disgusted if they looked at it and seen that we sat back and let it get to where it's at right now.
Well, there's a big difference. Like back then, don't forget, at the time of the Revolution, a lot of people lived on their own land. They farmed. That's why they all carried guns, because they had to. You had to survive. You had to hunt, right? And they already had their freedom and independence, and they fought for it. But when you're born into a situation where you don't have that experience, and you're being kind of dependent your whole life, and I know this, working in these assemblies, trying to get people organized, 90% of people say the same thing. Okay, we got to declare independence. We can issue our own laws. But you don't want us to enforce them, do you? I mean, what if we get arrested? Is it legal what we're doing? You hear this all the time. Is it legal? I said, well, was the American Revolution legal? Not according to the British.
Yeah, it wasn't.
We're all terrorists.
Yep, exactly. So it's like people want freedom, but they're afraid to be persecuted. They're afraid to go to war. They're afraid to fight. And like you said, you can't have one without the other. You're not going to be able to have your freedom unless you're ready to fight for it.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the system know that. Police, soldiers, there were the Oath Keepers years ago that were set up, American soldiers, active service men and women who were saying, we're not going to obey any word from government that violates the constitutional rights of our fellow citizens, right? And you get a lot of people doing that, but there's no leadership. There's no kind of focus for this. People are fighting each other, and that's exactly what the corporate elites want, right? Yep.
The only person I seen that's a true patriot that died for it and lived by what he said was William Cooper, which I'm sure you're familiar with William Cooper. He detached from the system. He didn't pay taxes. They had a warrant out for his arrest since 1998, and he hid out in his house because he did his show called The Hour of the Time. And they baited him to get out of his house in 2001 in November they had act like some kids were doing some stuff down at the end of his driveway. So he went down there, they ambushed him, and because he told them, if you ever try to come at me, because I'm considering you to be tyrants, because what you're doing is unconstitutional, I will kill whoever comes after me. And he did. He ended up shooting one police officer, and they ended up killing him. But he lived by what he said. He said, I'm detaching from the system. I'm not living under, tyrants and under this tyrannical order. and I will die for it. And he ultimately did. So he's a true American patriot that lived by what he said.
Right. And what of course, that kind of spirit is exactly what we have to kindle, and events are kindling it, right?
Mm.
People are seeing for themselves. But what we often say to people is that, um, in many ways, the system wants us as individuals to just strike back as an individual, right? Because then they can take you out quickly and use that as an example to scare people. This is what's going to happen to you if you forget it.
Yep.
What we do is we organize the communities. So, for example, on payment of taxes or non-payment of taxes, we pass a law. We've done this all over Canada, in our Republic of Canada up here. And we say, we are withholding federal tax because most of it just goes to pay off debts to banks, right? And hand over, hand it over to the Chinese or whoever the government likes. And we're passing law, and that withholds that to use the funds in our community. Now, when you do that, you're making a statement as a group, and it's harder for them to go after individuals then, because you're behind that, like the government does. The individuals stand behind the appearance of governance. Once you start governing yourselves, that's how you do. You act together, and that's a lot more secure way to take on the system, right?
I think the biggest issue that we're going to see in America is the reason why this type of thing can't be done effectively is because there's still too many people that are living, even with the Epstein files and all that, they're still completely, and these people call themselves patriots. They say they're patriotic Americans. They're still under some type of spell from Donald Trump. And those will be the people that we're living in a type of world where like your neighbor will turn you in. Do you get what I'm saying? So these type of people are still like fighting for the machine, even though if they knew they were, they would be fighting against it. But they're these type of people. Until those big group of people wake up, you're going to have a very mixed type of thing. You'll have like, you got your Democrats, you got your Republicans, and then you have these people in the middle that are fed up. So it's like this three-part defragmentation that needs to kind of be figured out before I think anything on that like level would be effective.
That's all true. And, that's why we try to break down those differences in these assemblies that we set in our common law courts, showing people, that they have the power to enact their own laws. There was an interesting quote from John Adams when he said, the revolution existed first in the hearts and minds of the people before any shots were fired. But then after, they learned to govern themselves in our constitutional assemblies. So you need not only the act of resistance, people have to acquire new habits that you learn only by getting involved in the struggle, right? So the way people are now is different than 5 years later after having been involved in these campaigns. You learn as you go, you change. So you can't just sit back with a blueprint and say, okay, we've got to do this. You've got to get out there with people and fight for it. And that's how things begin to change. But I think they said only about a third of people living in America at the time of the revolution actively supported the Republic, and then a third were Tories, and a third stood back and watched, right? And so, it's always, but you don't need a majority. You need a determined, organized minority to take the lead on this stuff, right?
And I think people are too comfortable in America right now. I think people have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if you remember, like, if you ever seen the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson, when he went in there, if you watch those assemblies, when they were first assembling in the American Revolution, they were scared. They were like, look, we're not taking on the crown. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to do this. Like, they got the biggest army in the world. We're just a bunch of farmers. We can't do this. And he remembers from being in war, he didn't want to, he was watching from his front doorstep, like watching these wars going across his land, these battles. So essentially, I think Americans, that's the biggest thing is, they're way too comfortable. Most of them don't know what warfare looks like and what it does to a man. So people have to learn, I think, in a sense, if it's going to happen, they have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's all true. And another problem, of course, with even the younger generation, especially, is their dependence on the technology. This, as we started the show talking about the Neuralink and that, even if you don't have Neuralinks in you, the iPads, the whole cyber system is designed to alter your memory, your consciousness, direct everything to as if everything's about information. You know, it's kind of this information heavy reality, and it's not about information, right? And reality doesn't come out of a screen, and we got to get people off that. As a matter of fact, when we hold our assemblies, we ban all the electronic stuff from our meetings, right? Not only for security reasons, but to say we got to get people to, you know, this has become a kind of a dormant organ, right? We got to get people back into a sense of reality, because that's when they have the confidence to change things, you know. And I've seen that up close, you know, when people take action together, how their enthusiasm and determination suddenly goes like that, because they've done something together. They're just not sitting in a room with their computer, right?
And see, even with myself, like when I'm not filming the show or uploading content, I put my phones into a Faraday box and I spend time with my wife. We'll sit around and talk, and we try to get back to being normalized. And I even took the devices from my kids. I've been taking their devices away. And it's almost like an experiment. You see, the longer they're away from them, there's almost a different person that emerges. They go from being, their whole character shifts.
You're right. And, you know, seeing that, I love, you know, when you drive by or walk by a schoolyard and you hear these kids running around, they're all screaming, and just the sound of children's happiness and voice. I mean, it's kind of like the sound of running water. You know, it's natural law. It's really the spiritual basis of what we do, right? And we're born as complete people. We don't need all these places. We don't need other people to tell us what to do. We can govern ourselves. That's America, right?
And see, it reminds me of the scripture. It says, I'll paraphrase, but it says, unless we become as children, we won't inherit the kingdom of heaven. So there's something with the spirit of being as a child that God wants us to manifest in the world, I'd say.
Yeah, I used to use it a lot when I had a pulpit, and you know, but you know, when you start really taking scripture seriously, and you become a threat to a lot of the churches. I learned that the hard way, right? Because they're so wedded to the system too. They're part of the problem, right?
Yep. So as far as with the Neuralink, when do you see, you know, a lot of people see what's going on with it. When do you kind of see, like you said, back to what we were saying about the centers they're setting up, how they're using these people to experiment with. When do you see this kind of really pushing forward? Like, have you seen signs of things that are really pushing this more to really amp up? Like, when do you see this starting to amp up?
It already has. And in fact, they've already deployed a lot of these program people, you know, um, not just as soldiers in that, but, you know, they're radically changing things as we speak. And the very fact that they've announced it's going to be mass produced, these Neuralinks, you know, you think that's just for quadriplegics? No, of course not. It's going to be a program of you know, forcible insertion of these things. And they also have a technology whereby now they can read your thoughts right here off the screen. They can influence those thoughts. They can do that. So if we don't separate from that, we can't be independent. We can't be free people. And people know that, but they're lacking the will to then go, okay, act. And that's what I really see from when I grew up in the 70s compared to now. It's mind blowing.
Oh yeah, I'll bet.
People's will and determination has gone right down the toilet, and it's like they're being sucked dry by something. And you know, it's really obvious to me. I just turned 70, and I thought, you know, what the hell has happened to everybody? Right?
And see, I've noticed they're definitely doing something to people. I know they're doing something to me because, like, even when I'm in the studio, like even now when I'm talking to stuff, it's like a lightheadedness almost. But I have this it's a Faraday type hat. It's a silver lined hat. Whenever I put this beanie on, I notice I think clearer. That type of dizziness, in a sense, goes away. And it's like, I don't know what they're sending out through the air, but it's weird because when I wear that hat, I notice that it goes away.
Mm. And being in nature too, you know, the frequency of the human brain in this natural condition is the same as that of the earth. It's a very low hertz frequency. So literally we're in tune with the earth. Just go lie in a field somewhere. After half an hour, you're feeling great. It's like I drink only mountain water. There's a source up here right off the mountain. And after going on mountain water, wow, was I clear. all the minerals that are lacked, the stuff they're putting in the city water and all that. You got to stay right off that stuff, right?
Yeah, and see, I drink like we have a filter. I drink a filtered straight through my well, so I drink
Right.
straight from a well, and I'm pretty far off the grid. Like they don't even have. I have to use Starlink. I don't even have internet where I'm at. Like they have no internet at all, no fiber optics. But during the summer, like when I go around my pool and stuff, I'm barefoot all the time. Like I walk and ground all the time. That's when I notice I feel the greatest is when I walk around out in my property like barefoot.
Right. When I whenever I do spread lodges with any of my native relatives, first thing we do take our shoes off, put our feet on the ground, right? Get grounded with Mother Earth. You know, it's just common sense.
Yeah. And you notice it and see they've done studies, they've proven it. Like they've done the thermal imaging, they've done everything and they've shown how what is it the positive versus negative ions it dispels like back and forth into the earth.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's a struggle now we got to all be involved in. I've got another call coming up earlier, so I only had 45 minutes today, but I'd be happy to come back on. I'm going to be in America within the month and doing talks everywhere. So
Yeah, just shoot me an email and then what we'll do is we'll even schedule another talk before then and then we can even schedule like a in studio something or we'll be able to get that figured out. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on today and it's been a really great talk.
yeah, thanks, Les, and we'll do it again soon because it's make or break time, like I said, right?
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, you have a great day, Kevin, and I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks so much.